Okay, in this video, we will be continuing on the beginner's guide to Love2D and Lua. If you haven't already, you will need to go to GitHub Programming Rainbow or github.com Programming Rainbow Beginner's Guide to Love2D, and you will need to clone that repository. This is the second video, so we'll be working with the code that we left off from in the first video. So if you're just joining this one, just grab the two files that are in here. You can delete these top two files that we're working with, the config.lua and the main.lua, and you can just copy the video files or the files from video 1 into here into the top level. Those will be what we're working with. Okay, and I'll show you real quick where we left off. We have the way we run this is with love and dot. And we have our background image, and we can press the space bar and we can change the color to a random color. And we can press escape or tell it to close. And it has the icon, it has the title, it has a width and a height of 800 by 600. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to create true type font text, and we're going to have it bounce around the screen. Okay, so moving into the, we're still in the Love wiki, and we're in the love.graphics. And we have, it's going to be in here, but I'm just opening up another tab to what I'm talking about. But we have this love.graphics.newFont, and we have this setFont function. We're going to be using those. And we have this love.graphics.print. Now, I think we should start here just to see what this does. This prints text to the screen, and we need the text for our first parameter, but the other parameters are actually optional. And they do different things like the X, the Y. We can have scaling factors. We can have other things. We're not going to be working with those today. We're going to be working with the X and the Y and the actual text. So I'm just going to grab this function right here. And we can just put it directly into our draw. Now we could either put it here or in the other one. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to put it here right now because it's not part of what, any information being held in our game. But I just want to show you what this looks like. So we need some text in here. So I'm going to use quotations, and I'm going to say love. Yeah, we'll just put love there. And now we can have our X and our Y, and what the X and the Y are is actually the origin of where this is going to be shown. So if we think about text, or if we think about anything in kind of game graphics, the origin is usually the top left corner of whatever the thing is we're talking about. So the origin of this text will be the top left-hand corner of it. And what this X and Y is where do we want that top left-hand corner to be on the actual game screen? So if we put 0, 0, it's going to be right up in the corner, right up in the top left-hand corner. So I'm just going to save that file, and then I'm going to run it. Okay, so we have this love here. It's really tiny, and I don't really like the font either, but it's in the top left-hand corner. So if we were to change this X and Y to say 10 in, this is going to be 10 in on the X, so this will be 10 pixels from the far left of the screen, and then say 50 down. So this will be 50 pixels down from the top, and this will be the top left-hand corner of the image. And we'll see this. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to use our own, our own font. So I have a font here in the fonts folder here, and it's called Free Sans Bold, and it's a true type font. That means we can make this font bigger and bigger and bigger, and it'll always be displayed nicely. It won't get pixelated when we try to make it bigger and bigger. And that's the first function we'll be looking at. Again, if you're looking for this function, it's in the graphics section, and it's called new font. New font, just like we had new image. New font, and it needs the file name. So and it's holding onto it in a variable so that you could use this once we've created this font, we can use it over and over again if we wanted to. And it does say that this function is slow, so you might want to hold on to it. We are actually only going to be using it one time, but we will hold on to it anyway. So in the way they're doing it is they're holding on to it in a variable called font. We are going to hold on to it, and it's going to be a variable inside of our game. We can call it font, but it'll be held inside of our game table. So I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the background here. I'm going to say self, because every time we say self, it's because it belongs into this game. So everything's always going to, anything that's game something, an item that is part of the game table, we don't need to say game, we just say self. And we're going to call it font. So this is actually going to be game.font, but we're inside a game already, so we call it self. And we'll use that function. And this function needs a file name. So it's going to be in quotations again. And it's relative to where we're calling it from. So it's in a folder called fonts, and it's called free sans bold TTF. So that's what we need. Fonts, free sans bold .ttf. Okay, so this is going to give us our font. We actually need a size too. So I think it's optional. Yeah, we can have a size. See up here it just says font name. But we can actually have a size, we can have a hinting, we can have a DPI scale. We're going to add a size to this. And the size is in pixels. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the size 60. And we could make a variable up here to hold 60, but since this is so simple already, I'm just going to put it here. So I'm going to put it comma and 60. Okay, and again, I could put a variable up here, say font size, and then I could put font size here. But because this is so simple, we can do that. I'll just show you real quick. So since this is just a number that I'm setting directly, I'm going to call it font size, and I'm going to say equals 60. The reason why this is here, I'm letting the load stuff do things that are like loading complicated things. So this is just literally me saying that font underscore size is equal to 60. So now here I could use self.font underscore size, and that would be equivalent. And now I don't need to look through my code for where 60 is. I can just change it up here in the top. So I've created this font, but I haven't made any text with it. So I can set this font now. That's the next function. And again, this is at Love Graphics, so this is in the graphics section. You'll find these. But I can set the font to the font that I've just created. So I'm going to use this right here. I can just grab the whole thing. So this is kind of setting the default font that Love is going to use to some font that you want to set it to. Otherwise, it'll keep displaying in the old font. So I'm going to paste that in, and it's complaining about this undefined global font. That's because ours is not called font. Ours is actually game font, or self.font, because we're inside of this method here for game. So it's self.font. Because right here, this is self.font, so this is self.font. Now, if we display the same thing, we should get, for one, it should be a free sans bold font, but it should also be larger. It should be in size 60 pixels. So let's show that. There we go. And it's still 10 pixels in and 50 pixels down because we set that earlier. So that's kind of the font. But we want this font to move around the screen. And so now we can just change the X and the Y of this font down here. But this is just kind of magic variables, and this is a magic string. We don't like any of this stuff, really. I don't want to be doing any of this. I want this to be a variable, and I want X and Y to be a variable, partially so I'm not using magic numbers, but the other reason is so I could use the love.update to update those variables to have it move around the screen. So let's do that. Right up here in game, where we set our simple variables right away. I want the text. So yeah, I'll leave the font on top, and I'll say text. This is just the actual text that we're going to be displaying. And it should be love. So use a capital L. You can put love, love2D, whatever you want it to be. And then I want to actually hold on to some other things. I want to hold like an X and a Y position. So I'm just going to say text, and I'm going to put underscore X. It's just another variable, but I know now that this is the X position of my text. So it's easy to read. It's kind of self-documenting code to just use names that are meaningful. So text is the text that I want. Text underscore X is where's the X position of this text. And we can just have it default at 0. That's fine. And the same thing, I'm going to put Y. Have a default at 0. And let's just, sorry, I should be using commas at the end of here. This needs a comma, each one of these. You can even use a comma on the last one. It's okay. Okay. And I'm going to go down. For one, I'm going to pull it out of here because this is going to be stuff that I could put game text here. Well, I'll show you. I could write game.text and then game.text X and game.text Y. So this will work. Okay. So we have love again, but now it's using a variable. And it's back here in the very top left because those are both set to 0. But I actually don't want it here because I'm thinking about this is using game stuff, right? And I don't need to say game over and over again. I can just put self because I could change it to, I could instead have this game be like a prototype, and I can make 50 different objects of it, and they could all have different names. And I don't need to change the name over and over again because they're all referencing self. So whatever they're called, they know what they're called. So it's going to make more sense later if you make more complicated games, but because I'm basically using this game variable over and over again, I don't need to use that. I can let it find out what its own name is. And I'm going to let it update itself because it's kind of part of the whole the game thing. So I'm going to put it in game draw. And now games draw back to front. So the renderer that is different colors gets drawn first, and then this background gets drawn on top of it, and then the text that we're going to put here will be drawn on top of that. So as it goes down, that whatever's on top is drawn first, whatever's lower down is drawn on top of it. So I'm going to put it here, but I'm going to change all these to self. So if I ever change the name of the table from game, it won't break all the code. Or if I were to clone game to be 20 other items, all under different names, there again, the self will just figure out what their name is called. So I have that here, but I really want this to move around the screen. So I end up with another problem. I can move the X and Y around the screen, but I really want the width and the height of it as well. Because the X and the Y only represents the top left-hand corner. So what if I wanted if I want the text to move and to bounce off the right-hand side of the screen? I don't want to check the X against the right hand of the screen. I want to check the X plus the width of the text against the right hand of the screen. So I need the width, and I also need the height of the text. Now, actually, the height of this text is actually 60 because we actually said it was 60, but it might be a little bit bigger depending on how font is rendered and all that stuff. So there's actually a way to find this out. So back in graphics again, and there's a couple different ways to get to it. If you're in graphics up here, there's kind of these other sections here that don't show up on the left panel. One of them is font, and that's over here. So inside of a font, we've already made a font, so we know what a font is. We have these methods, and one of them is getHeight and getWidth. GetHeight is the easiest one because it's literally you just call the method and it returns the height. GetWidth is different though, because we have to think, we know what the font is, but we need to actually have a text to know how long the font, if we have a type of font and we have a size that it is in the true type font and the size and everything as the font, we need to know a word, how long that word is, to know the length of the width of the whole entire sentence or word or whatever it is. So this one is actually going to need the text put into it, and then it's going to give us the width of the whole thing. So this is how I'm going to get the width and the height of the text that we're using. Is I'm going to just grab the width of the font, and I'm going to grab the height of the font, and I'm going to grab the width of the font with the text put into it. Okay, I'm making it sound more complicated than it is. It's just, this one is just a straightforward function, or it's a method call rather, on the font. So again, we have down here, we have we set our font here. I'll just put it under it. I'm just going to put this in. Now this height, I'm actually going to call it, like I called it text underscore X, I'm going to call it text underscore H. Okay, so that'll be our height of our font, right? And I can't say font because it's going to say, what is this object right here? I need self.font, right? If I just watch this, see, it says undefined global font. It's like saying it's looking for a global called font. It doesn't know what it is. That's because we have a local self.font. That's a game.font. So if we just put self in front of this, that should fix it up for us. And oh, sorry, this needs to be self as well. Yeah. Up here, you don't need to put self because we're constructing the game table. But down here, it's already been constructed, and I'm adding a new member to game called text underscore H. So we need this self here. If we don't put it here, it just thinks I'm making a global variable again, or a local variable inside the scope of this function or this method. So you make sure you put these selves here. This one is just a function call right here directly. It's just setting something for love. It's not doing something for our specific game table. This one here, we are creating a new member called text H, and we're setting it to height. So this is the exact same for width. We're going to do the same thing, except width, remember, takes a text. And this one will be W. Or we could just change the top one. W and width. And we need a text in here, and our text is self.text. Because that's the text that's right up here, the love. So that gives us our width and our height. And I just would like to run the code real quick just to make sure I haven't made any mistakes. We shouldn't see anything change. Nothing's different. We're just getting more information for later to use. We have moved where we're drawing this, but it should still draw the exact same way as it did before. I just want to make sure I didn't make any spelling or punctuation or any kind of errors. Okay, it all looks great still. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to make my a method for game called text called update text, and then I'm gonna make a function called game update text, and then I'm going to call that from our built-in love.update. Okay, so this will be something specifically to update the text, but we know that these get called automatically by love. So the updates, I'm going to put all my updates in here. My draw is just hooking in. Now I don't need to make a game update and then inside the game update call it game update text. I'm just going to call it directly from here. It'll be simple enough. I'm going to put it underneath the rand color right here. So it'll be function game colon, and this will be update text. The reason why I'm not calling it just update is because we're going to have other updates that are, this one's specifically just updating the text. And end. And down here, right here, these get called 60 times a second, both the draw and the updates. This one only gets called one time. So right here, I'm going to call my game update text right there. So the first thing I want to do with the update text is I just want to update the X and the Y position. And so I need to move it. So I really want to hold onto a variable called velocity. But I want an X velocity, but that X velocity may be positive sometimes, it may be negative sometimes. If it's positive, it's going to the right. And then when it hits the wall, I want it to change to negative, right? And I'm also going to have this for the Y direction too. I have a positive Y velocity, and then when it hits the bottom, it's going to go negative. So I have this X velocity and Y velocity that I want to change to positive and negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make 3 variables. One's just going to be called velocity, and the other 2 is going to be X velocity and Y velocity. And the reason for this is I don't want to use magic numbers in my code to change it to, it's going to be 3. So I don't want to put -3 in. So I could just put the negative version of velocity in. And if I ever want it to not be 3, I can just change velocity in one spot. So up here, where we're setting the simple variables, I'm going to put text underscore vel for velocity. I'm going to say it equals 3. And this is going to be 3 pixels per frame update, and it's going to, and Love is running at 60 frames a second. There is a way you can get delta time out of here, but since this is a very simple beginner's guide, we're not going to use delta time. We're just going to use pixels. So this is going to be moving at 3 pixels, and that's going to be multiplied by 60 times a second. So it's going to be 180 pixels per second that this will be moving at. And I cannot remember if I can call, if I need to put 3 in here. What I want to do is this, and I'm off the top of my, I can't remember if I can do this. I'm going to say equals text vel, and I need commas on these. Now, my code notes actually have 3 in all of them separately, so I'm not actually sure if this works. I have to check. Okay, let's try that. Yes, so I can't define it here and then use it here, so I'm just going to have to put 3 in all of them. Or I could actually do it here and then put them in the load, but it's no big deal. But in the code, there's going to be no 3. But it is repetitive here, but it's a minor thing. So those are going to be all the variables that we're using for this. And now we're just going to start manipulating them. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to move the X and move the Y. So I'm going to take the X, so it's going to be self text X. And in Lua, I can't do it like a plus equals. I can't do that. Lua is a very simple, powerful language, but it is simple enough where you need to say plus, equals self text X plus self text X vel. There's X vel down here. So a lot of languages you would just say plus equals, and it would take the adjusted size and put it back in. This one, it doesn't do that. That's because they are keeping the language simple, but it's fine. It's a minor thing. So basically I'm saying I want the new text to be the old text plus the velocity. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the Y. And the reason why I have this X velocity and Y velocity is because we will be changing those independently. Okay, so this is just going to update our, our movement, right? And if we are calling this, from update, and we are drawing with those. So we should actually see text move from the top left-hand corner up here down the screen diagonally. There we go. and then it's going to go off the screen, and it just keeps on going because we didn't tell it to do anything else. We're not checking if it's hit the bottom or anything like that. So now what we can do, since we've moved them, is we can check, like I said, if it's hit the bottom, if it's hit anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check all of these in their own if statement. The easiest one is the x. If the x has moved is smaller than 0, then it's gone off the screen. The left-hand side of the text has gone off the left-hand side of the screen because the screen, the far left of the screen of the game screen is 0. Anything smaller than 0 is off the screen. And the far left side of the text is 0 for the text. You know that, well, the x is the left side of the text. So if the x ever goes to 0 or less than 0, it's gone off the left-hand side. So what we can do is we can make sure velocity is a positive direction then. So we'll do it like this. If self.text x is less than 0, that means it's somewhere under 0, and it's gone off the left-hand side of the screen. So if it's less than 0, we just need the velocity to be in a positive velocity. So for it to get off, for it to move left, it had to be, velocity had to already be negative, and we're just going to set it to positive. We're not even going to reset the image or do anything. We can just keep it really simple and just make sure velocity is positive now. So the only thing we're going to change is the velocity. And this is xvel. And we're going to set it equal to self.text velocity. So our velocity variable is just holding on. It's just up here. It's always just 3. But these guys can be 3 or -3. This one is just 3. So it would have had to been -3 for us to be moving in a negative direction. And once it's penetrated 0, we're going to say, well, now it's got to be a positive. And that's going to cause it to bounce off the left-hand side of the screen. And to bounce off the top, it's going to be the exact same for the y-axis. So I'm just going to copy that and pasting it. And I'm going to change it to y. And this one to y. Sorry. That's a very simple one. We have to do a little bit of math for the right-hand side because we need the x plus the width of the text and then checked it against the width of the screen. And there is in graphics again, there is a getWidth. Where is it? So there's a love.graphics.getWidth, and this actually returns the width of the screen. And there is a getHeight as well. So we can use that just to dynamically, we know it's 800, but just say you have a game and it could be different sizes. You don't want to hard code these things. I mean, 0 is always 0, but your width could be, you could be making a bigger game or a little game or a game that the window changes size. So it's better to just dynamically get that information. So for the width, I'm going to say if self text x plus self text w, so that's the x position plus the width, is greater than, and now I'm going to do the love.graphics.getWidth. And this is a function call. And this function call is going to return the width, which should be 800. So if it's bigger than this, we need to set it to a negative velocity. So we'll go self.text xvel, and we'll say it equals negative self.textvel. And it's not capital V, normal V. So we're saying if we're moving this direction in a positive velocity, and we check and we find out that our x position plus the width of the text has penetrated the right-hand side of the screen, whatever it is, the game screen, which we get from here. If it's gone bigger than that, then we need to make sure our next velocity is in the other direction. It's in the negative direction. So we're going to set the x velocity to negative velocity. And this is the exact same for our height as well. And you do have to make sure if you're copying text like this that you do go through and you got to make sure that all the x's are y's, because if you forget one of them and the width needs to be height, if you forget one of them, you might have some strange behavior happening in your game. You're going to be wondering for a while what happened, and then you realize it was just an x wasn't set to y. So this should give us text that is bouncing around the screen now. Oh, yeah, there we go. Cool. And we still have our background colors that we can change. So we're just moving them up here and we're checking bounds, and we're not, again, I'm not even changing the x position or anything. I'm just saying, hey, I want the velocity to be the other way now. And I could set it up here. I know that these are set 3 times, but these two are dynamic off of this one, at least later in the code. This one is the one that I could change the speed with it. Like if I wanted it, say 6, twice as fast, you'll see it initially moving. It'll move slowly initially until it bounces off a wall, then it'll move twice as fast in whatever direction it bounced. So it's still moving the same speed, but now it speeds up because it's being set in the code, later. I would have to change all of them to 6. But 3 is good enough. So in this one, at least you can see kind of adding table variables up here. All these variables are basically to do with text. That's why I kind of use an underscore. And I just called the font, or font size rather. Because font is actually set here. So that name has already been used, but this is the size of the font. The rest of it is dealing with text. So if you kind of understand how it works, is the font is how the style of font for your text that you're creating, the style and the size. Whereas the text is the actual thing that you've created, or you're telling the love to draw on the screen. So that was us loading a font, new font, setting that new font so it can be used. It's set now. We're getting the width and the height of our font so we can hold them in variables, so we will be able to know the right side or the bottom of our text where it's at. We're drawing our text and we're drawing it on top of the background so it's under it. We are creating this update method here for update text, and we're just basically updating with the velocity, and then we're just checking if we've reached a bounds and reversing the velocity. If it's going right, we're making it go left, or if it's going down, we're making it go up. And that's going to be it for this one. So hope you enjoyed that. Thanks again. Bye.